Today I'd like to talk about the Revolutions podcast by Mike Duncan and just give an overview of the whole podcast, or at least the whole podcast as it exists right now. A couple of quick disclaimers before I get into this review. First disclaimer is I have previously made a number of videos already on the Revolutions podcast. I've reviewed it season by season and made a video for each season. I don't necessarily recommend that you go back and watch them, although I will link to them all in the description down below, but they're not great videos. So you can safely skip those. And in fact, what I'm going to try and do in this video is try and assume that maybe you've not seen any of my previous videos on the Revolutions podcast and just try and talk through the whole thing more or less as if I've never talked about it before. Second disclaimer, and if you've been following the Revolutions podcast, you already know what's coming. My original intention was to review each season and then listen to the whole thing front to back and do one final video because Mike Duncan had announced that season 10 would be his final season. But since then, Mike Duncan has announced that he is restarting Revolutions podcast. Wikipedia labels this stage 3. I'm not sure where stage 2 came in. I don't know if Wikipedia is just being strange. Maybe if you check this video 5 years in the future, the Wikipedia page will have changed. Undoubtedly it will have, but at the moment, Wikipedia lists seasons 1 through 10 as stage 1 and 2 of the Revolutions podcast. So whatever, stage 3 will be coming next. And anyways, this review will only cover the Revolutions podcast as it exists right now, and then I guess the next stage that is coming will have to be covered in future reviews. So this is the Revolutions podcast, seasons 1 through 10, which up until relatively recently was just the Revolutions podcast. It was regarded as a complete body of work. So, I think those are all my disclaimers out of the way. Let's jump into it. Revolutions podcast is created by Mike Duncan, who was previously famous for creating the History of Rome podcast. And from the History of Rome, he decided to jump to Revolutions, which is quite a jump. You're jumping from the ancient world to the modern world. You're jumping from something which is relatively politically neutral, the ancient world, into something that is very politically charged, right? People are still arguing about the French Revolution and the Russian Revolution to this day, and arguing about who was right and who was wrong, etc. So it's quite a change of focus, but I was totally up for this. Well, I mean, I didn't become a Mike Duncan fan until after he was already established with his Revolutions podcast. But once I found out that he was doing the History of Rome, had done the History of Rome, and was doing the Revolutions podcast, I thought, oh, great, I love both of those things. And I guess there must be something in common with Mike Duncan's fan base. Almost everybody, a lot of people at any rate, seem to have made that jump. So there's got to be something in common between people who really love ancient Rome and people who really love revolutions. I thought it was just me, but I guess it's a lot of us. So if you love ancient Rome and revolutions, then Mike Duncan is the podcaster for you. And if you just like revolutions, then just start right in at Revolutions. You can skip ancient Rome. He makes a few comments referencing back to his previous podcast on the history of ancient Rome. But if you're not interested in it, you don't need to listen to it. Just start right in with Revolutions. So Mike Duncan takes, in again, seasons 1 through 10, takes what is known as the long 19th century. So the long 19th century is a term, I believe it was coined by historian Eric Hobsbawm, which indicates that the 19th century actually started with the French Revolution in 1789, and it ended with, I guess either World War I in 1914 or the Russian Revolution in 1917, depending on who you ask a bit. And that is the long 19th century, in which there were quite a number of revolutions. There was the French Revolution, the Haitian Revolution, the Spanish-American Wars of Independence, the revolutions of 1830, revolutions of 1848, the Paris Commune, the Mexican Revolution, and then the Russian Revolution. And also a few revolutions in there that Mike Duncan doesn't cover. The Greek Revolution, the Mediterranean revolutions of 1820s, etc. So it's a tremendously important decade for understanding the modern world, and it's a very revolutionary decade. It's a lot of changes happening in the world at that time, both evolutionary, gradual reforms, and revolutionary, violent insurrections. A period of great political instability, which gave birth to the modern world as we know it. And Mike Duncan does a great job of walking us through these revolutions. Now, he actually starts with what I would consider the prelude to the Age of Revolution, which is the English Revolution and the American Revolutions. So English Revolution is season 1, American Revolution is season 2. And again, I think this is a perfectly great place to start. English Revolution and the American Revolution are both preludes to the Age of Revolution. Now, when Mike Duncan first started this series, he was just coming off of the History of Rome, and which is a massive podcast, and he wanted to do something a little bit more bite-sized and a little bit more manageable. So the original idea is that he would condense each revolution down to 15 episodes. But as he himself says, he soon found that unmanageable. He said he had to leave off a ton of interesting stuff in the English Revolution, just trying to condense it down to 15 episodes. And then when he got to the French Revolution, he realized there was no point trying to condense it down into 15 episodes. You'd never be able to properly tell the story in 15 episodes. And as he said, if you're not going to tell the story properly, why do it at all? So the French Revolution is, 54 episodes on the French Revolution. And these are decent-sized episodes, 30-minute, 40-minute episodes each. And then after that, the constraints are off. Now, some of the seasons are long and some of them are short. So the Revolution of 1830 or the Paris Commune are both shorter seasons. But the Revolution of 1848 and the Spanish-American Wars of Independence are longer seasons. And then the big one of all, 103 episodes, is the Russian Revolution, which is massive, and Mike Duncan makes quite a meal out of retelling it, and it is absolutely brilliant. He does a near perfect job of retelling the Russian Revolution, in my humble opinion. So Mike Duncan, at this point in his evolution, is a great storyteller. And if you listen through his whole body of work, it is interesting to see him evolve. He started out a bit shaky in the first few episodes of the History of Rome. Someone with some potential and promise, obviously, but an amateur. But for my money, he just gets better every year. And by the time he got to the Russian Revolution, particularly the middle part of the Russian Revolution, maybe roughly episode 30 through episode 60. The end part of the Russian Revolution does drag on a little bit, but episode 30 to 60, that is just perfect narrative history, great storytelling, Absolutely fascinating. It hooked me. If you're a history nerd, and if you're not a history nerd, you wouldn't be listening at this point in the review, huh? If you're a history nerd, this is the podcast for you. Absolutely excellent storytelling. Now, I have in the past, in some of my previous videos, complained about stuff that Mike Duncan left out, which I regret doing, I think, because number one, that's a very lazy way to review something. Something's always going to be left out. And number two, I've been discovering more and more, especially as I have started lurking on the Reddit boards discussing Mike Duncan's work, that every fan has their own idea of what they want Mike Duncan to cover next and what they're upset that Mike Duncan left out. And it's very divergent from fan to fan. I mean, I have my list of the things I really wish he would have covered. But that's just me. It's not true among all his fan base. So, I don't know. Just to get this out there, in terms of revolutions I wished he would have covered, in my ideal world, there would have been 2 seasons on the 1820s. One just on the Mediterranean revolutions in general, the Spanish Civil War, the Italian revolutions. He does cover this as standalone episodes. I would have liked a whole season. And then the other big revolution in the 1820s was the Greek Revolution. I don't exactly know what his reason for skipping over the Greek Revolution is. Somebody on Reddit said that he said once, I don't know where he said this, that he would have liked to do the Greek Revolution, but it didn't work out for, I don't know, whatever reason. But yeah, those are my 2 big ones that I would have liked to see him do. And then, in the French Revolution, I would have liked to see a standalone episode on Thomas Paine, because he does some bonus episodes. I would have liked to see a whole standalone on Thomas Paine, maybe connecting Thomas Paine's threads from the American Revolution to the French Revolution. But, I just really like Thomas Paine. So that's my personal interests. Different fans will have different things that they complain that he left out about. And really, it's quite silly to complain about this stuff. I hope Mike Duncan doesn't take any of this stuff too seriously. I really hope that he doesn't watch any of my reviews. I mean, he probably doesn't, right? He's a big enough name that he's not going to watch some random guy on YouTube making reviews of him. But if he does pay attention to this, hopefully he recognizes, and I think he does, that when people complain about stuff he left out or stuff they would like to see him do, that's a form of flattery. Because there are any number of other sources you could go to for that kind of stuff. I mean, I don't need Mike Duncan to cover the Greek Revolution. I can get the Greek Revolution from plenty of other books or YouTube videos on it. I can get that information elsewhere easily. But I want it from Mike Duncan. I want him to do it because I so enjoy his work and his narrative style, and I would love to see his take on it, etc. So I'm sure it gets annoying for him that fans are always complaining about this, but it's a form of flattery when the biggest complaint people have is that they want more from you. That being said, I really hope he doesn't watch these videos. He wouldn't watch these videos, would he? Okay, yeah, so the other great thing about this Revolutions podcast is it does a great job of showing how, even though Mike Duncan has broken these up into individual revolutions, It's really just, as Mike Duncan himself has put it, one revolution sweeping back and forth across the Atlantic. So the American Revolution influences the French Revolution. The French Revolution is directly the spark for back across the Atlantic to the Haitian Revolution and the Spanish-American Revolution. And then that goes back to the Spanish Civil War in the 1820s. The unrest in the 1820s leads to the revolutions of the 1830s. The revolution of the 1830s sets the groundwork for the revolutions of 1848. Revolution of 1848, at least in France, leads directly into the Paris Commune. The legacy of all that is setting up for the Mexican Revolution back across the Atlantic again. And as well as the Russian Revolution, all the way over on the east side of the continent. So you get the sense of how these are all individual, but you get the sense of how they're connected, both in terms of the grand sweep, but in a lot of individual episodes. How Lafayette was directly influenced by what happened in the American Revolution, and how that influenced him during the French Revolution. He makes ties between the Haitian Revolution and of course the French Revolution, but also the Haitian Revolution and what was happening in America at the time, and the Spanish-American revolutionaries. So you get a very clear sense listening to it of this wave of change that was sweeping the world, and kind of, again, as Mike Duncan puts it, one big revolutionary wave going back and forth across the Atlantic. But that being said, although these are times of often great idealism and some positive changes that are making the modern world, the horrors and tragedy of revolution are fully on display. I think Mike Duncan said in a tweet once, revolutions are tragedies. It means that there was the potential to solve these problems. Revolutions are tragedies is the tweet. The rest of this is my own interpolation. But I'm interpolating, it means that there was a potential to solve these things non-violently, with no loss of life, because of various reasons. It was unable to do that. The revolution ended up breaking because of a failure of leadership. And then they almost always result in great humanitarian disasters, great losses of life, massacres, counter-massacres. They're very violent and tragic affairs that do bring out the worst of humanity in many different ways. So, it was interesting on Reddit. Again, I've been doing some lurking on Reddit, getting views of different fans. Some of them said that listening to Mike Duncan's podcasts has changed them from being liberal to more socially radical. And Mike Duncan himself has said that. That is, he worked his way through the revolutions of the 19th century, 1848, etc. He realized that it was not enough just to solve the political question. There was this emerging social crisis, and something had to be done about the social question, which is what's driving the revolution in 1848 and all the revolutions post-1848. But other listeners on Reddit are saying that the Revolutions podcast has pushed them the other way. They used to be radical, Marxists, pro-revolutionary, and listening to this Revolutions podcast, they realized that a revolution was something to be avoided at all costs, because it's very difficult to pinpoint a revolution that worked out well without some very dark period. Possible exception, I guess, the English Revolution may be, although it ultimately ended up in a failure. Well, no, I take that back. The English Revolution resulted in plenty of massacres, especially in Ireland, didn't it? Sorry, that was an oversight on my part. I'm somewhat thinking out loud as I film these. American Revolution may be a possible exception to it. But yeah, the interesting thing about the American Revolution is, as Mike Duncan again himself has said, doing the Haitian Revolution completely changed Mike Duncan's views on the American Revolution, because he realized that Washington and Hamilton and the American founding fathers were analogous to what are called the big whites in Haiti. People who wanted independence and autonomy for themselves, but wanted to keep their slave-holding plantations. And in America, they ended up being successful, but in Haiti, it ended up in a slave uprising. Speaking of the Haitian Revolution, I myself, going into this podcast, knew next to nothing about the Spanish-American Wars of Independence, the Haitian Revolution, and the Mexican Revolution. The other revolutions I had some background in. I had read up on them a little bit, or a lot in some cases. The revolutions had been an interest of mine. So had some background in those. But the Haitian Revolution, the Spanish-American Revolution, Mexican Revolution. I mean, I knew the names. I knew there was a guy named Pancho Villa associated with the Mexican Revolution, and Zapata. Knew Zapata. In fact, somewhere in this room, actually, I have a Zapata shirt that I have from high school, but didn't really know anything about Zapata. Just thought he looked cool on a t-shirt. Sorry, where was I? So I knew the names. I knew who Toussaint Louverture. I knew that was a name associated with the Haitian Revolution, but didn't know anything else about it. So, it was quite a useful education for me. And I suspect, unless you are just really a hardcore history nerd, you have a blank spot somewhere. Maybe you know about the Haitian Revolution, but then you don't know about the Paris Commune or something. You probably have a blank spot somewhere on your radar. Sorry, that's a wrong metaphor. You'll have blank spaces somewhere. And listening to the Revolutions podcast all the way through will definitely fill in those blank spaces. But the Haitian Revolution in particular, I think, is something that not a lot is often known about in the popular conscience. Mike Duncan has put together a very solid narrative history on something that was not widely known before. His series on the revolutions of 1848 as well. I mean, the revolutions of 1848 is a mess, because you've got revolutions all over Europe, and it's very hard to create a narrative of it. Mike Duncan, I think, does a very admirable job of creating a narrative history out of it. He sorts through it very well. He doesn't do everything, but you can't do everything. The revolutions of 1830, the revolution of 1830 in France is, again, something I haven't seen a lot of sources on. And there was a period in college when I was interested in it and just couldn't find any good books on it. But Mike Duncan has made a good history of it. I mentioned there are various things I wish he would have covered more. Talking about the Revolution of 1830, that reminds me, I wish he had done more on the revolutions throughout Europe in the wake of 1830. But he did cover some of it a bit. But I said I wasn't going to talk about things he left out. So anyways, it's, if you love narrative history, it's a great time to be alive. And sometimes I envy the kids who are coming up and have all this options of great history podcasts to listen to and great history YouTube channels to listen to. Because none of this was around when I was 18 and I was first developing an interest in the French Revolution. How this would have blown my mind, this whole series, if I could have discovered if it had been around when I was 18 or 19, huh? But yeah, the young people around today, they've well, I shouldn't complain, huh? I still got to experience it. It was in middle age for me, but I still had a great time experiencing it. But yeah, a great resource which covers some territory that's already been thoroughly covered, like the French Revolution, covers some territory which beforehand, I don't think there was a lot of accessible sources out there, like the Revolution of 1830, the Haitian Revolution, etc. Revolutions of 1848, puts them together in a great narrative. The only thing, I would recommend this podcast to any history nerd without hesitation. The only thing I would say is, if you're ambivalent about whether or not you want to get into this, start with season 3 first. Because season 1 and 2 is when Mike Duncan, it was before Mike Duncan had figured out his format. And he was still trying to put the revolutions into 15 episode blocks. But the French Revolution is just fascinating in its complexity, in its colorful characters, in the different factions, in the twists and turns it takes. And Mike Duncan is an excellent guide through all of that. His series on the French Revolution, season 3, is just fantastic. So, if you have any doubt at all, start with that one. That will be the season to hook you. On the other hand, if you're like me, this is your area of history, this is what you're interested in, then just start at the beginning and work your way through it. You are not wasting your time. It's spectacular. And if you've already listened to it, let me know what you thought about it in the comments down below. Thank you very much, and I will talk to you next time.